Welcome back and thank you for joining us. Now our discussion topic this morning, Anambra Guber election, analysis on electoral integrity and more. Now over the weekend, the governorship election in Anambra drew national attention. Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, reported that more than 2.8 million voters were cleared ahead of the poll, following a cleanup of the register. And then observers noted that the voting process was generally peaceful and well managed, with INEC and security officials commended for their coordination. However, the election wasn't without controversy. Reports emerged of alleged inducement and vote buying in several local government areas of the state, with one national figure describing the phenomenon as widespread, warning that bad governance is fueling the practice. Now, the security agencies and INEC had earlier warned against vote inducement and set up operations to preempt such practices. Now, this morning, Professor joining us this morning from Awka, the capital of Anambra State, is Professor Earnest Toochi Aniche. He's a professor of political science and international relations at the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, West Africa. He will be speaking with us this morning, and he'll be helping us to unpack several key questions, like how credible was the election in Anambra State, really, and also looking at the logistical readiness that match the ground, match the realities on ground in that state. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. Good morning. All right, let's start up with the electoral credibility based on the elections that happened in Anambra State on Saturday. INEC reports that over 2.8 million voters collected their PVCs in the state. Now, from your perspective, does high voter registration automatically lead to credible elections, or are there other factors we should consider?
Okay, it did not automatically lead to credibility of the election, but it also shows some level of enthusiasm among the voters. We can see the improvement in terms of the percentage voters turnout this time around, if we compare it with that of 2021 gubernatorial election in Anambra State. That of 2021 was just about 10%. This time around, the 2025, about 21%. Yet, that improvement is still short of those of pre-2021 gubernatorial elections in Anambra State. And then also, when you compare it with that of in terms of the total number of registered voters, it is still a far cry. There's room for more improvement. And then in terms of the credibility of the election, there is the INEC guidelines were followed from what report we got from our observers from CDD West Africa. Mostly, there are improvements in terms of deployment of materials, INEC officials, and then security agencies in most of the polling units. And people acted orderly. Very, very few fatalities. I only heard of one fatality in Urumba. So people behave themselves very well, but the whole credibility was marred with issues of vote trading. We call it vote trading in CDC West Africa because two parties are involved, the seller and the buyer. So there is widespread evidence of vote trading, and it was even open. They were not hiding it.
All right, now, Professor Aniche, looking at the Anambra governorship election as well as what went on down there. You're an observer, and some observers noted that inconsistencies between votes casted and reported tallies in some local governments. What is your take on it? You just spoke about a vote buying and vote selling. Has it been persistent in Anambra State, talking about buying and selling as well as the consistency of the way the election was conducted?
Yeah, it's gradually becoming a permanent feature of our electoral system. It's not supposed to be part of the electoral system. It's just an anomaly to our electoral system that political parties are engaging in wholesale vote buying, and it is uncalled for. It's not a good omen for our political system, and something needs to be done towards that regard. We made some suggestions on how these things can become, especially criminalizing it in the ongoing electoral reform, to make sure that those who are found wanting are arrested and prosecuted.
All right, let's look at security when it comes to elections. It is very important for voters to feel secure while casting their votes. Now, there are reports of voter intimidation and heavy military presence in parts of the state. Did the security agencies protect voters or suppress a turnout? According to reports, there was, an encounter between the deputy governor and the military as well. So what is your take? What really happened?
Yeah, from our observation, there is elements of voter suppression and intimidation, but it is not as widespread. So what happened that in some cases the security agencies, did not do their duties in terms of protecting voters, and we don't know why things are going that way. There is some element of people trying to use elements of a situation where some people try to use the federal might to intimidate, use federal might through the security agencies to intimidate voters. But I can tell you, it is not that widespread. We notice it in some polling units.
All right, Professor, looking at vote buying, which is one of the major issues that we have in Nigeria's electoral system, it was reported that there was vote buying, and it was widely done in several communities during the elections that happened on Saturday. Now, how does this practice affect the legitimacy of the results? Because we can see on the front pages of our national dailies this morning that the Labour Party and the ADC candidates are rejecting the result, as Soludo is being re-elected as the governor of that state. Really, what is the legitimacy of these results, being that we have seen a massive vote buying on Saturday, and what strategies could we put in place to help curb this menace called vote buying?
Yes, like I said before, the vote trading was widespread. Almost all the polling units where our field observers reported from. So you see, it undermines the legitimacy of the electoral process, and there's need to curb this phenomenon. So I think we suggested one, like we said, criminalizing it by factoring it in the ongoing electoral reform. Also, if there's, can you also use, even though it's a sort of human behavior, but then INEC can also use technology to fight it in terms of putting cameras and polling units, to gather evidence of, concrete evidence of those who are involved in those act and their political parties, so that they can be arrested and prosecuted, and also it can be used for purpose of electoral tribunal cases, as evidence for politicians during the electoral petitions.
All right, Professor, looking at this particular election, we know that it is quite important for INEC to, be able to do what is necessary and make sure that the elections go through smoothly as possible. Now, looking at the BVAS was meant to enhance credibility, yet there were reports of malfunctioning and delays. So was this a case of poor preparedness or deliberate compromise? And aside from that, in several polling units, results reportedly took hours or days to upload. How do we reconcile that with INEC's promise of a real-time transmission to IREF?
Okay, as you can see, technology has its own negative side. Sometimes it can malfunction. Those things are possible. Those things are possible, but it is a matter of a degree. In this election, the BVAS that malfunctioned are very, very minimal in number, and we are quickly rectified. So, and in some cases, it could be a situation of the handlers not knowing the actual thing to do. But we know in most of the polling units, we observe that these malfunctioning were quickly rectified. And then you can see also that the results came out early. They about as at 7 p.m. On the election day, that's on Saturday. Up to over 90% of the results were already recorded in IREF, which is not a very bad record.
All right, Professor, looking at voter participation, it was reported that there was a high collection of the PVC, but at the end of the day, some areas saw low turnout. People did not come out to vote. But then on Friday, reports came out that some people were leaving their communities or where they stayed to go to their communities to vote. But then we are still hearing that, some of these areas, the people were not there to cast their vote. So what really is the problem? Is it that there was no enough voter education as to why people should vote? Or is it a thing of, Nigerians have lost that trust when it comes to the electoral system, so they don't feel the need to come out and vote?
In fact, it's a combination of many factors. One, erosion of voter confidence in the electoral process, where many voters, especially after the fallout of 2023 elections, many believe that their votes don't count, and then also it's also a function of I think in some countries abroad, there is no need for imposing no movement during election day, because you see, some people maybe might have done their voter registration near their workplace, and during election, and they are no longer in their workplace, are at home, so may not be able to move from their home to the polling unit that is near to their workplace to exercise their franchise. So we have to retain this issue of placing no movement during the election day. I know sometimes it is done to improve security situation, but we have to do something around that. Even in some countries around us in Africa here, during election day, people are free to move. There are vehicular movements. Last election in Ghana here. So I think that is an area we have to retain, because sometimes it also affects people's ability to exercise their franchise on election day. And then other factors include political parties' inability to mobilize the people. in this particular election. The intra-party crisis weakened the political party's ability to mobilize the people. There was low-key effort at mobilizing people, voters in this election.
All right, Professor, to piggyback off my colleague's question, looking at the electoral process, as she made mention, about above, I would say, 2 million people have registered for their PVC, and about over 500,000 voters collected their PVC and were signed in. But below that have casted their vote, and some, were invalidated. But looking at the turnout, it's quite low. Is it due to, low political interest, or was it due to fear, apathy, or loss of faith in the electoral system? Because at this point, a lot of Nigerians would feel like they wouldn't be able to go out because some electoral violence might happen, or they've lost entire interest in the electoral process because they know even if they do vote, their vote does not really count at the end of the day.
Well, like what I said before, there is a high level of voter apathy now, especially after following the aftermath of 2023 election, where many voters now feel that their votes can't count. That is what you call erosion of voter confidence. So there is need for INEC now to ensure credibility of the election, to up people's voter confidence in the process. And then when you talk of a number of people that picked their PVC, sometimes most people see it as more as a means of identification than using it to vote on election day. So it may not always materialize in terms of high voter turnout. But however, it is an improvement from, like I said, from 2021 gubernatorial election. In this case, 21% voter turnout, unlike that of 2021, that was about 10%. So it's an improvement, but there's